Late at night in the medieval city, everyone was fast asleep, but one person hadn't yet closed his eyes. A vision of the terrible fate of his homeland, Europe, and the recently discovered America came to him. He was in a hurry to write everything down for posterity so that they could prepare for the worst. It was the 16th century French soothsayer Michel de Nostradamus, known as Nostradamus. In this episode of Histographics, we're going to tell you about what troubles the clairvoyants of the past predicted to the countries of Europe and the United States. The most famous of the fortune tellers was Nostradamus. A physician by profession, he became famous among his contemporaries for preventing the plague epidemic in Aix-en-Provence. The medic ordered all townspeople to wear protective masks, burn clothes after communicating with patients, spray alcohol at home, and bury corpses in lime. Nostradamus said that the disease from one person to another is carried through the air by microscopic organisms. During the day, he monitored the implementation of the rules of protection from invisible enemies. And at night, visions came to him about the future of people, nations, countries, and continents. Nostradamus foresaw many events in subsequent centuries. For example, the Great Fire of London, the French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power. In modern history, he predicted the atomic bombing of the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the terrorist attacks on the United States on September 11, 2001, and much more. Nostradamus wrote down his visions in the form of quatrains, rhymed quatrains. The seer expounded everything in an allegorical form, so as not to fall into the dungeons of the Inquisition. The church believed that only the Most High can know the future, and for mortals to make predictions is a great sin. Every 100 quatrains Nostradamus collected in collections, the Centaries, 12 of which have survived to this day. In one of his quatrains, he wrote that natural disasters will destroy the new city. Researchers are sure that the prophet meant the new world by the city. It will be destroyed by the eruption of a supervolcano, which will be accompanied by devastating earthquakes and tsunamis. And then volcanic ash will bury the United States of America and other countries. The danger of the death of the United States from the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano has already been confirmed by modern science. Recently, scientists at Yellowstone National Park have noted a sharp increase in the number of earthquakes around the giant. According to researchers, this indicates the awakening of a supervolcano, which can explode at any moment. After Yellowstone, the eruption of smaller volcanoes will begin, which will provoke earthquakes and tsunamis of unprecedented strength. Huge waves could even reach Europe, flooding first of all England and Holland, and then many other coastal states. However, if the supervolcano does not explode, another no less terrible scenario of Nostradamus may work. The predictor claims that the Western countries will be enslaved by the conquerors from the East for a long time. The bloody events will create a severe economic crisis, to which will be added severe destruction due to the passage of a huge space object near the Earth. One of the quatrains of Nostradamus speaks of the treacherous seizure of the island of Cyprus by the Turks and Moors. In the other, about the conquest of most of Europe by allies from Chinese and Muslim countries. In general, Nostradamus in his predictions quite often mentions that it is the Eastern peoples who will bring about the end of European civilization. The battle with the invaders will also affect the United States, and as a result, most of the country will be destroyed. But the climax of hostilities will take place in the UK, where the enemy will use incredibly powerful chemical weapons. After that, you must agree, information about the development of chemical weapons of war in Syria takes on a particularly ominous meaning. Much later in the 20th century, the death of the United States and Europe as a result of confrontation with the East and natural disasters was promised by Vanga Pandeva Goshtarova from Bulgaria, known as Baba Vanga's grandmother. As a 12-year-old girl, she fell into the epicenter of a giant tornado and miraculously survived, although she was blinded. And when she became an adult, she began to fall into a trance and predict the future. According to Vanga, all her senses sharpened after losing her sight, making it possible to find out what will happen in tens, hundreds, thousands of years. The clairvoyant did not write down her revelations because she was illiterate and did not allow the prophecy to be filmed on video. But if someone did not obey, then, they say, they did not prohibit the shooting of a video. But when the unlucky cameraman, rubbing his hands, was about to publish a sensation, the film turned out to be empty. However, after a visit to the clairvoyant, visitors recorded all her words, and Vanga's nephew wrote down the prophecies of the famous aunt. Now contemporaries can assess the accuracy of Grandmother Vanga's predictions based on these records. According to experts, more than 7,000 of her revelations, or 80 to 90%, have already come true. It is believed that the Bulgarian clairvoyant predicted the death of the English Princess Diana, the melting ice caps on the planet, the September 11 attacks in the United States, and the election of Barack Obama. Vanga gave predictions for the future up to the 6th millennium, when due to a cosmic catastrophe, all living things will disappear from the Earth. But much earlier, already in the 21st century, Europe, she said, would be cold and empty. There are several interpretations of this prediction. Some understand it as the death of people from viruses. This point of view has been fueled by the situation with COVID-19, which is heavily hitting populated European countries. Others claim that Vanga meant, first of all, the cold and emptiness in the souls of the Europeans due to the loss of morality, and the process of decomposition of moral foundations, according to supporters of this interpretation, is already in full swing. The legalization of soft drugs and same-sex marriage in many European countries is cited as an example. But still, others are convinced that the indigenous people on the continent will not remain as a result of a global war. Their position is supported by other prophecies of Vanga. For example, that a black shadow will cover Europe and people will cower in fear, and strangers will come to rule. In some predictions, the clairvoyant adds that in 2043, Europe will turn into an Islamic caliphate with its capital in Rome. As for America, Vanga, like Nostradamus, gave terrible prophecies of the coming natural apocalypse. "Let America not be," said the Bulgarian clairvoyant. "Such earthquakes will arise there, such tsunamis. It will flood. In the end, people will all run away." This prediction was already partially fulfilled in 2005, when the most destructive hurricane in history, Hurricane Katrina, hit the United States. It hit New Orleans and Louisiana especially hard. Water flooded 80% of their area and destroyed more than 750,000 houses. Nevertheless, in the last century in the United States, Vanga's words about the impending destruction were called the Orders of the Soviet Kremlin, and the clairvoyant herself was called a KGB officer. The superpowers tried to involve physics in their work. During the Cold War, the CIA allocated about $2 million a year to study the paranormal abilities of people, and records of secret experiments with clairvoyance were found in the archival documents of the KGB. However, in the Soviet Union, Vanga's connection with the special services has always been denied. According to all the testimonies, the Bulgarian prophetess could be recruited or used in any other way, for she had an overly independent character. Moreover, not only Vanga in the 20th century predicted the death of Western countries and the United States from the blows of the elements, the American Edward Casey also made a sinister prediction. He is called the sleeping prophet because Casey predicted the future in a state of deep sleep-like trance. He foresaw the Second World War, the formation of the State of Israel, the assassination of John Kennedy. In 1902, a clairvoyant declared that during his sleep, he traveled back in time and saw the world of the 21st century. The Earth, according to him, at the time faced global natural disasters. From this, Northern Europe, half of the USA, and the Japanese islands gradually went underwater, and Africa became the abode of cold and ice. Casey linked these disasters to a change in the poles and a shift in the Earth's axis by 16 to 20 degrees. Futurologist and seer of the 80s, Gordon Michael Scallion, also predicted a change of the poles in the near future by 20 to 45 degrees. He believed that the catastrophe would be caused by global warming, the use of nuclear weapons, misuse of technologies, or an asteroid collision with Earth. Scallion claimed that spiritual insight allowed him to draw upon a detailed map of the world after the disaster. There is no Europe and America on it, at least in its modern form. On the Scallion map, almost all of Northern Europe is submerged as the tectonic plate collapsed beneath it. In the place of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, hundreds of small islands were formed. Most of Great Britain, Rome, and Genoa fell below sea level. and only an island in the vicinity of Paris remained France. Also, according to the Sears forecast, the Northern American tectonic plate will collapse when the poles change. As a result, about 150 islands will appear in the place of California. All coastal areas of the country, from Maine to Florida, will be flooded. In turn, scientists do not completely reject such a development of events. NASA said that 250 new celestial bodies were discovered near our planet. 72 of them are approaching the Earth. So the probability of a collision with an asteroid is quite high. And Professor Donald Lawson Turcotte of the University of California believes it is quite probable that the poles of the planet will shift after the impact of a space object. This can lead to catastrophic changes on the world map, similar to those that Scallion saw during his epiphany. The prophets see another terrible danger for Europe and the United States in deadly pandemics. For example, the American clairvoyant Sarah Hoffman in 1979 predicted the death of the United States from an epidemic of an unknown disease. This vision was so terrible that the woman tried to commit suicide. The doctors barely managed to save Sarah. She said that in a terrible vision, thousands of patients appeared in front of her in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Salt Lake City. The unknown ailment started out like the flu, but then white blisters the size of a dime appeared on the bodies of people, which quickly turned into swollen sores. Some people had blood flowing from their nose, mouth, eyes, and ears. Passerbys stumbled and fell, and then died within 24 hours. Chaos reigned everywhere. Trade stopped. Marauders and criminals raged on the streets. An equally terrible end to America and Europe from wars, epidemics, and natural disasters was also promised by the abbess of the German monastery of Hildegard of Bingen in the 11th century, the modern American seer Joe Brandt, and many others. Do you think so many well-known soothsayers can be wrong at once? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, click on the bell and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new interesting episodes.